Hello, hockey fans, and welcome to the fourth and final installment of our look at the great career of Joe Nieuwendyk. The first video in this series, we covered how he went from being deemed a nobody when drafted to becoming an instant star in Calgary, accomplishing many awards as well as a Stanley Cup. The second video covered the rest of his tenure in Calgary, where he became the team captain. The team suffered numerous playoff woes and questionable changes, but yet remained a contender. In part 3, we covered Joe's contract dispute with the Flames and subsequent trade to Dallas, which at first looked like a flop, but then the Stars suddenly became contenders as Joe found his groove again despite fighting injuries, but was perhaps robbed of a chance at the Stanley Cup after an MVP caliber season in 1997-98 and getting injured in the first game of the playoffs. But as his injuries lingered, he made it through the next season and set a whole new standard of clutch playoff hockey, a career-defining performance, and finally getting his second Stanley Cup and winning the Conn Smythe Trophy as playoff MVP. And where part 3 ended, Joe fought through an injury-plagued season, his 13th of his career I might add, and missed 34 games, with both a bruised chest and later a separated shoulder, playing just 48 all around, but powered through the playoffs and still delivered some big performances. And the Stars made the finals only to lose to the Devils. And now, here we are. Going into the 2000-2001 season, Joe Nieuwendyk and his Dallas Stars were still considered a heavy Stanley Cup contender. After all, they'd appeared in the last two finals. They were in a four-way tie for second-best preseason odds of winning it all with the Blues, Avalanche, and defending champion Devils, whereas the Red Wings were the top favorite to return to glory. Joe's health came into question, but his leadership was still valued by Dallas and his teammates. Guy Carbonneau retired after a great career, so the Stars added more depth on their lower forward lines, adding the veteran Ted Donato and Sean Van Allen. Let's see if the Stars can make their way to a third straight Stanley Cup Finals appearance, and what our guy Joe Nieuwendyk can do to factor into that. The big guns are armed, Joe along with Modano, Hull, Lennon, Langenbrunner, and Morrow, with role players such as Mike Keane, Kirk Muller, Grant Marshall, and Lyashenko, and to star defensemen Zubov, Sador, Hatcher, joined by Matt Fitchuk and Lukowicz, and in net, Eddie the Eagle. Joe looks sharp to start the season as the Stars got to a pretty good start. On October 20th, he had 2 goals and an assist against the Blackhawks, including, the game winner. In the month of October, he had 5 goals and 4 assists for 9 points in 12 games. The Stars were rolling in November, and so was Joe Nieuwendyk. 6 goals, 4 assists, and 10 points in 11 games, an impressive +4. First, a rude welcome for the expansion Columbus Blue Jackets to the NHL, as Joe notched 2 goals in that win, and later in the month he had more success against Columbus with a goal and an assist, and did the same against his former team, Calgary. However, that game was a loss. In December, however, Joe went into a slump and the media was again questioning his abilities, pouncing on him like white on rice. But as the month wore on, he bounced back with 2 huge games. First, it was a happy Festivus occasion for Joe on December 23rd, when he notched a 3-point night against the Penguins with a goal and 2 assists. And then on New Year's Eve, scored a hat-trick in a big 6-1 win over the Rangers, his first hat-trick in over 2 years. He had 8 points again in January, this time in 12 games, as he would miss a couple, and went the opposite way with just a goal and 7 helpers, and had 3 2-assist outings, first against the Atlanta Thrashers, then in back-to-back games as Joe took on Mario Lemieux for the first time in nearly 4 years, as the Stars beat the Penguins, but would lose to the Coyotes in the next game despite the 2 helpers from our guy. In February, he still stayed consistent, again with another 6 goals, 4 assists, and 10 points, and yes, another +4. He had a goal and a helper against Vinny Domfus and the Sharks, and Joe wanted to make the expansion Minnesota Wild, welcome to the league, and much like he did to Columbus, he did so with 2 goals and an assist, with a dominant 3 points and a win. But at the end of the month, against the Canucks, Joe suffered a groin injury and he's going to miss 11 games. In Joe's absence, however, the Stars were still doing very well. And he returned in late March and finished the season hot, 7 points in 7 games, including 5 goals, and scored in his return on March 25th in a tie against the Blues. And then 2 goals and an assist against the Oilers in an exciting win on March 30th, as the Stars finished 48, 24, 8, and 2 for 106 points, even better than last season. This is their 5th straight 100-point season, their 5th straight division title, and the 10th division title of the regular season, that is, of Joe's career. However, they finished 3rd in the West, but either way, the Stars are looking good, and our hero is back into the playoffs as now, it's playoff time! And here we go again for the 5th straight season. The Dallas Stars are taking on the Edmonton Oilers, who are the 6th-seeded team, and they actually had a really good year rather than just slipping into the playoffs. They had 93 points and were now coached by Oilers great Craig McTavish, part of their Stanley Cup glory days, and they were still led by Doug Weight, who had a tremendous season, as did Ryan Smith. The Oilers also made a great move acquiring Anson Carter, and on top of that you had Reb Murray, Mike Greer, Dan Cleary, and George Laraque. Their defense had grown to be even more effective. Yanni Nienema led the way. You had Igor Ulanov, Tom Poti, Jason Smith, and they played Mike Milbury like the dumbass he is by acquiring Eric Brewer. In net, Tommy Salo was practically an Iron Man in goal, playing 73 games and playing very well at that. The rivalry had become one-sided, but this Oilers team could be a bigger threat than the 97 one ever was. Game 1 in Dallas, and it's a tight-knit defensive game with a show from the goalies, as Salo and Belfour play fantastic. The first period is scoreless, but both teams exchange goals in the second. After a scoreless third, we are off to OT, and Jamie Langenbrunner scores the winner as the Stars take the first game. Joe wasn't all that present in this one. Game 2, the game is tied 1-1 in the first period, but ooh, power play! It is Morrow to Joe! The Stars take the lead, but the Oilers tie it 22 seconds later. And to make things work, Joe collides with defenseman Scott Ferguson and sprains his right ankle. He's expected to miss 7 to 10 days. The Oilers take the game 4-3 and the series is tied. Game 3, we shift to Edmonton and without our hero. The Stars lead 2-0 late in the game and it looked good, but the Oilers scored 2 goals with 1:03 remaining and 7 seconds remaining respectively. But Benoit Hogue, who replaced Nieuwendyk on the second line, scores the overtime winner with 12 seconds remaining in the extra period. The Stars take a 2-1 series lead. Game 4, it's another tight game and tied 1-1. We go into OT, but this time it's Mike Comrie of the Oilers scoring the winner. The series is tied heading back to Dallas. Game 5, the Stars lead 2-0 after 2 periods, but the Oilers stunned Belfour with just 3 goals, just under 3 minutes apart. But late in the period, 18-year veteran and former Devil star John McLean ties it with under 5 minutes left to play. And yet another overtime, and Kirk Muller still has an old overtime magic he had in '93 with the Habs, and was set up by his former Habs teammate Mike Keane, as well as former Devil teammate McLean, and the Stars with the Oilers up against the wall. Game 6, Joe is back and ready to eliminate this Oilers club. Back in Edmonton, Ed Smith scores early in the first, and the Oilers lead 1-0 after 2 periods. After Brett Hull tied the game in the third, the Golden Brett would set up Joe Nieuwendyk for the, how do you say, oh yes, game winner, as Modano would seal it with an empty netter. The Stars take the series in 6, and Joe, despite being limited to just 3 games, scored the series-clinching game winner, reaffirming his reputation in series-clinching games, but hopefully he can stay healthy the rest of the way. So the next round, the Stars would face the St. Louis Blues, a team they beat out in the second round 2 years prior. This Blues team finished with 103 points and got revenge on the San Jose Sharks in 6 games in the opening round after the Sharks upset them massively the year before. Joe's old pal Al MacInnis, along with Chris Pronger, still lead that devastating blue line, along with Alexander Kavanaugh, Sean Hill, and Bryce Salvador. Up front, they have their superstars Pavel Demitra, who missed many games but was ready for the playoffs, and Pierre Turgeon. Veteran forward Scott Young had a career year with 40 goals, while Johan Heck, Dallas Drake, Mike Eastwood, Corey Stoneman, and grizzled vet Scott Mellamy were all big pieces of the puzzle. And of course, a huge late-season acquisition, all-star Keith Tkachuk. Meanwhile, in goal, they had the awesome Roman Turek, and backing him up, the ever-talented Brent Johnson. A very evenly matched series ahead. Game 1 in Dallas, it does not go well. The Blues are overmatching the Stars, it seems, and skate away with a 4-2 win. Joe played pretty terribly and was a -3. Game 2, Turek is a savage, and the Stars can't get anything going. The Blues lead 2-0 since midway through the first, and the Stars keep pressing when the clock is counting down. Hull sends it into Joe, who scores. The Stars still have time. They press for the equalizer, but he can't get it. The Stars have now dropped 2 games at home and trail going into St. Louis. Game 3, the Blues fans are excited, but the Stars lead 2-0 after the second, after goals from Keane and Modano. Then the Blues storm back, and we're out to OT. Midway through, Corey Stillman scores. This is not good. Another poor performance from Joe. Game 4, the Blues fans have the brooms with them, hoping for the big sweep. After a scoreless first, the Blues took a 2-0 lead, but then it's Morrow to Jamie to Joe. The Stars have life and trail by 2 going into the third. The Stars press and press, and Joe is hustling out there, trying to make a miracle happen, but a late goal by Pronger and an empty netter from Young, and the Stars season. The hopes of a third straight Stanley Cup Finals appearance are dashed, and despite Joe's hustle in Game 4, it made little difference. And overall, he didn't have a good series, but then again, neither did anyone else really on the Stars. The Blues outplayed them in every single facet of the game, and now this team makes to make some real evaluations because of it. The Blues were going to lose, however, in 5 games in the conference final to the eventual Stanley Cup champion, Colorado Avalanche. Joe scored 29 goals and 23 assists for 52 points in 69 games. Not too shabby. Once again, he clicked with superstar Brett Hull as Hull assisted on 9 of Joe's goals, nearly a third of them. And the two worked together to collaborate on 4 assists. Also, Joe was helping the progression of Brendan Morrow, who he set up 7 goals for, and out of the 20 the youngster would have that year as well. Also, Joe still clicked with Langenberger when they were shifted together, as well as Grant Marshall and, of course, Sergei Zubov. Joe showed he had a lot left despite his injury-plagued season, but again, the end of the season made you wonder exactly how much he had left as the wear and tear had to be getting to him. But once again, he produced offensively, finished a +5, and helped lead his team to their 5th straight division title. However, Coach Ken Hitchcock's relationship with the team had become pretty volatile at this point, as the Terry Crisp effect that Joe knew all too well in Calgary was taking shape. Joe Nieuwendyk was about to enter his 15th NHL season in 2001-02, and his 7th in Dallas. Some are amazed he even made it this long, but he was no quitter. He felt he could still go, and that attitude has not steered him wrong yet. In the face of everything he has taken, he comes back and still plays with heart, spirit, and produces beyond the expectations of many. And now changes are coming, however, in Dallas, as Brett Hull has left for a chance to play on one of the most stacked teams of all time, the 2001-02 Detroit Red Wings. However, the Stars signed superstar forward Pierre Turgeon from the Blues, and also brought in former Avalanche star Valeri Kamensky, as well as Donald Odette, defenseman Jyrki Lumme. Also, Pat Verbeek returned to the club to boot. On opening night in a win over the Nashville Predators, Joe had a goal and an assist, and the goal was indeed the game winner. Joe also had a goal and a helper on October 26th in a big win against the powerful Red Wings and former teammate Brett Hull. And Joe had 7 points in the first 13 games with a pretty lackluster -4. And the Stars themselves were looking somewhat sluggish as Ken Hitchcock's relationship with his players was growing even more volatile than usual. The Stars showed improvement in November, and Nieuwendyk was on fire. 13 points in 12 games, including a 2-goal performance against the Kings on November 15th. And then another stretch of 7 points in 3 games, 2 assists against Ron Francis and the Hurricanes, a goal and a helper against Ronik Recchi and the Flyers as he scored a late-tying goal to preserve the tie, and then a huge 2-goal, 1-assist, 3-point performance to cap it off in a win over the Wild, assisting on Zubov's game winner to boot. Internal problems for the Stars continued. Joe had 8 points in 14 games in December, and then 10 points in 13 games in January, including more good fortune against dominant Red Wings, scoring 2 goals, including the game winner. But after a loss against Chicago on January 23rd, Ken Hitchcock, the team's head coach for 6 years, was fired. The team's consistency issues and his increasingly grating coaching methods finally rubbed this organization the wrong way, and he was turfed. Also, Bob Gainey, the man who traded for Nieuwendyk, had stepped down as GM after nearly 10 years with the club, but stayed on with the organization. As a lot of the guys who were brought in were already gone, and Turgeon was having perhaps the worst year of his career, and Rick Wilson took over as head coach as he had been an assistant with the Stars for nearly 10 years. It some sort of made sense. Doug Armstrong was named GM, and things were not looking all that bright in Dallas, but Joe was about to have other fish to fry. The Stars were still struggling to find their footing, but one thing you notice is that Joe has been staying healthy so far this year. And after a devastating heartbreak in Nagano back in 1998, our hero, our boy, Joe Nieuwendyk, gets another shot to represent Team Canada at the Olympic Games. This time, it's in the U.S., in Salt Lake City, Utah. And despite his dismissal from the Stars, Ken Hitchcock assisted head coach Pat Quinn for this tournament. And Ken most definitely was key in Joe's selection. And also, no doubt, while Pat Quinn was on board, as he was Team Canada GM, Wayne Gretzky. The Dallas Stars, again, were very well represented at these Olympics. In addition to Joe, Ed Belfour joined the team as a backup goaltender. Meanwhile, Martin Raczynski, who the Stars acquired from the Habs during the season, was representing the Czech Republic. Jiri Lehtinen once again represented the Finns, and Mike Modano represented Team USA, as Langenberger was not chosen, nor was Darian Hatcher. Nieuwendyk was joining a Canadian team that would have 14 future Hall of Famers and a few more who still may get in at this point. He was again reunited with Calgary Flame alums Al MacInnis, who was still with the Blues, and Theo Fleury, who is now with the New York Rangers. Also, another teammate of his for Team Canada was Calgary Flame superstar Jerome McGinley. Yes, the very man the Stars traded to get Nieuwendyk. Can Joe and the gang make history? It didn't start out very well. A disastrous outing against Sweden where Canada was down 5-2. 2 days later, they faced underdog Germany, whose defense gave the Canadian club a lot to handle. However, Canada still led 2-0 in the second when Joe began a play that led to Joe setting up out of foot for a big goal. The Germans caused a collective gas power when they scored 2 goals late to close the gap to 1 goal, and Canada barely escaped with the win. And now it was the Czechs. All eyes in Canada were on this one with the ghost of Nagano haunting many of the 9 players that were on the club who were still there in 2002, and hockey fans across the nation as Hasek was the man between the pipes yet again and still at the top of his game. It was tied 2-2 late as Mario Lemieux had 2 goals for Canada, but with 6:43 to go, the Czechs got one back. The entire nation held their breath as Canada's fate could very well be sealed. But as Joe Nieuwendyk began to get things going, it's once again time for the Theo and Joe Show. Theo and Joe Show. The 2 former Flames worked together, and Joe Nieuwendyk, oh Canada, scores with 3:24 to play. Canada fights for the tie, but people don't have much faith for their upcoming medal round. First in the quarterfinals, it's Finland in a tight 2-1 win for Canada, as Finn goalie Jani Hirme was insanely great in net, but the Canadians still pulled it off. And now Canada faces Belarus in the semi-final? Yes, perhaps only second to the Miracle on Ice, Belarus pulled one of the biggest upsets in Olympic history, taking down the very Swedish team that beat Canada in the opening game. But needless to say, Canada still dominates the semi-final 7-1, and we're off to the gold medal game. And it's against Team USA. Canada hadn't won a gold at the Olympics in 50 years, and the US hadn't won since the infamous Miracle on Ice. And there were certainly some faces Joe knew all too well on this American side, obviously Modano, but he had other former teammates, Brett Hull, Gary Suter, and Phil Housley. The atmosphere was electric and Joe was hungry to help bring it home for Canada. The Americans struck first, but goals by Correa and Aguinla gave them a 2-1 lead to end the first period, and the Americans tied it in the second. But Joe Sakic, who was named tournament MVP, scored the infamous goal that set it all off. Aguinla got another, Sakic got another one late. Team Canada, 2002 Olympic gold medalists for men's hockey. Joe Nieuwendyk proudly received the honor he desired with his baby child by his side. He was a jubilant man who felt on top of the world. His heroics against the Czechs are fondly remembered, and his use as a defensive forward in this tournament differed from his role a bit in '98, but once again, he excelled in every which way he was asked to, and truly grasped the concept of the international game. What a moment for Joe Nieuwendyk. However, he was faced with the sad reality that his team back in the NHL were having problems. The Stars still had a winning record, and they were in the thick of things for the playoff hunt, but something just seemed off about this bunch. After returning from the Olympic break, March was approaching. Joe had 2 goals and 3 assists for 5 points in 9 games. On March 18th, in the midst of a road trip facing the Chicago Blackhawks, Joe scored a power play marker in what would be a 2-2 tie. And indeed, this would be Joe Nieuwendyk's last game as a member of the Dallas Stars. The very next day, on March 19th, 2002, Joe Nieuwendyk, along with Jamie Langenwerder, were traded to the New Jersey Devils in exchange for a first-round draft pick, plus Jason Arnott and Randy McKay. The Stars were still in a playoff race, and many felt with Joe's experience of playoff success, this could be a huge mistake, as well as trading Langenwerder, who developed with tremendous leadership skills. But the Devils saw the importance of these two in the way they approached the game, and the fact that they were willing to sacrifice a first-round draft pick in this trade shows they wanted them bad. But some Stars fans and media, again, balked at this. Some said the change needed to be made. Overall, it was mixed, but regardless, after 7 seasons, Joe Nieuwendyk no longer plays for the Dallas Stars. During his season with the Stars, however, Joe had 23 goals, 24 assists for 47 points in 67 games. It was the Stars' second leading scorer just behind Modano before the trade. In his final year with the team, he actually had 18 different players set him up for goals, as things were just chaotic with lines being shaken up every which way. So of course it's his defenseman who helped him the most, as Sador set him up for 6 goals, just over a quarter of Joe's total, and the two collaborated on 2 assists, and Joe set up 5 Sergei Zubov goals, and he clicked well with these two all throughout his tenure with Dallas, like he did Suter and McInnes. Suter and McInnes in Calgary, Sador and Zuboff in Dallas, oh, too familiar. Joe once again did find some chemistry at Pat Verbeek, however, and seemed to work pretty good on the grinding line with Kirk Muller, and still helped Brendan Morrow progress, as well as Langenbrunner. The latter of this group, however, will at least join him in the Garden State. It's a tale as old as time. You do well, you win. Your team has tremendous success and you're a big part of it. But things fall apart, and major shakeups need to be made in year one of them. Either way, Joe Nieuwendyk was still a power play force, still huge in the clutch, and can now pack his gold medal up with him as he heads to the Devils. With the addition of Joe Nieuwendyk, the Stars became contenders when acquiring him. It didn't start well at all. He had the absolute worst year of his career and faced media scrutiny as the Stars missed the playoffs. But almost overnight, after that, he helped turn them into contenders. Again, 5 straight division titles, all but his first and last season there, he had achieved that. 2 President's Trophies as a league's top team, and of course the Stanley Cup in 1999, the second of his career, first in 10 years, and was able to shake off his playoff misfortunes at long last, achieving his second ring, and an epic performance of clutch play winning him the Conn Smythe Trophy as playoff MVP. He fought through injuries that cost him a playoff run in 98, but preserved in 2000 through injuries, fought through their pain to bring the Stars back to the Cup in 2000. And now Joe is an Olympic gold medalist and a 2-time Olympian, with participation in Nagano in 98 and of course the gold medal in Salt Lake City. Joe helped the Stars simply learn how to win. Joe scored 178 goals with the Stars, adding 162 assists for 340 points in 442 games, and finished his time at the club with a +7. He was second in game-winning goals in 98 and finished in the top 10 the year following, and returned to the top 10 in power play goals as well in 1998. And he finished top 10 in goals as well that year. Who can forget that whole epic 98 season, one of the best of his career. Joe's stats may have been different from Calgary, but the game was changing. He tweaked his strategy to suit the benefit of his team, and his value to the team and their only championship as of 2023 has left his legacy etched in the hearts of Stars fans in Dallas. The Devils' main desire to obtain Joe was his ethic of teamwork, which was definitely attributed to the Devils' success in their 2 Cup wins. The Devils had appeared in the Cup in a loss to the Avalanche the prior season, but problems reared their ugly head and Larry Robinson was let go as head coach as now Kevin Constantine took over. The Devils were a pretty good team still, however, but at 30-25, 9-4, 14 games left to play, a playoff spot was not at all guaranteed. And playoff savvy is another reason Joe was acquired due to his time with the Dallas Stars. The Devils bolstered a strong lineup still, however. Patrick Gilliash, Bobby Holik, and Peter Sikora were all hard-working defensive forwards who could also score. Scott Gomez, however, was having a pretty rough year. They had other hard-working forwards such as Sergei Brelin, John Madden, rookie Brian Deonta, and Valerie Kamensky, who was Joe's teammate in Dallas earlier that year. And now he has Jamie Langenbrunner in tow with him. The defense, however, was the core strength of this club still. Scott Stevens in his 20th season was still as vicious as ever. Scott Niedermeyer in his 10th season was still among the best. Brian Rafalski was becoming one of the best Blue Liners in the league, while Colin White, hard-nosed vet Ken Danico, and 15-year defenseman Tommy Albelin completed a one-of-a-kind blue line. And in net, the man Joe became very familiar with while winning his Olympic gold medal, goaltender Martin Brodeur, among the league elite, along with Wah, Hasek, and Belfour. So how will Joe fare in the Garden State? Can he help this team clinch the playoffs and return to glory? Let's find out. Well, he notched an assist in his debut with the Devils on March 20th, 2002 in a win over the Hawks. The very next game against Nashville, he scored a goal and a helper in another win. The goal was the 493rd of his career. He and more big games for the Devils, and they went back on a roll, back-to-back 2-assist games for Joe, first against the Panthers and then in Pittsburgh, and then had another 2-helper game against Boston on April 7th. Joe had 11 points in 14 games, and the Devils went 11-3-0 after acquiring Joe Nieuwendyk, and it made the postseason, and yes, it's playoff time. The Devils ended up as the 6th-seeded team, despite having a better record than their 3rd-seed opponent, the Carolina Hurricanes, by 4 points. The Canes had won their division. And hey, they were a talented bunch, led by Ronnie Franchise, Captain Ron Francis, who I covered on this channel, an ageless wonder at age 39, having one of the best years of his career. Also, veteran Rob Brindamore, Sammy Kapanen, Jeff O'Neill, Eric Cole, and Bates Battaglia were all very productive. And they also had the playoff-savvy Martin Jelena. On defense, the Canes were bolstered by Sean Hill, Aaron Ward, Brett Hedekin, and the reliable vet Glenn Wesley. And in goal, the Latvian sensation Arturs Urbe. Coached by Paul Maurice, this never-say-die Canes team was ready for playoff action, but can our hero keep the Devils on their roll. But after not missing a game all season for the first time in his career, Joe Nieuwendyk misses Game 1 of the series due to an injury, and Irbe stops 34-35 shots, and the Devils fall 2-1 in Carolina. Game 2, our hero returns, and he played pretty well, but the goalies again were the story, as Broder and Irbe were just sensational. The game was tied 1-1. We went to OT, but a goal from Bates Battaglio gave the Hurricanes a 2-0 series lead as the series shifted to New Jersey. The Devils' defense was insane in this outing, as Joe was killing up the faceoff circle as well with his checking abilities. The Devils were cruising 3-0 in the second period, as the frame was winding down on the power play. Elias to do! And now Rafalski slaps it home. The Devils took a 4-0 lead, and that's how it would end. They are back in the series. Game 4, Broder and the Devils' defense was again superb. Our hero wasn't overly present in this game, but the Devils still won 3-1. This series is tied as we shift back to Raleigh. Game 5, Joe is being contained quite heavily, but regardless, the Devils lead 2-1 as time is winding down, but Jeff O'Neill scores with 1:29 to play, and the Devils would lose in overtime. Game 6, back home, and our hero needs to really step things up, as Kevin Weeks is in net for Irbe, but however, he's a beast in net, stopping everything shot at him. Joe only registers one shot, and the Canes only need one goal to win this game, and I took the series in 6. Not a great series for Joe, as he was barely a factor in the 5 games he played, and was heavily subdued by the Hurricanes team, and his recent playoff success in Dallas did not spill over to New Jersey, sadly, and some of the media were even speculating the Devils weren't going to keep him for next season. The Hurricanes went all the way to the Stanley Cup Finals after beating Montreal, Toronto, but then lost to the red-hot Red Wings in 5 games. Joe scored 2 goals and 9 assists for 11 points in the 14 games he played with the Devils, after his trade from Dallas, of course. Obviously, the Devils knew the way he worked with Langenbrunner was highly successful, as Jamie assisted on both of Joe's goals, and then Joe set up 2 of Jamie's goals, while also finding chemistry with Elias, assisting on 2 of his goals and collaborating with him on 2 assists. Joe's arrival in New Jersey was a major boost for getting them into the playoffs, as he still stayed consistent in his production. And despite the playoff disappointment, he would be seen as an asset to the team going forward, and perhaps can lend his leadership ethic to this club and get them back to Stanley Cup glory still. As for the Stars, they missed the playoffs for the first time since Joe's first year at the club in 95-96. Coincidentally, that was the last time his former team, the Flames, had made the playoffs, as they had missed the playoffs for the 6th straight time this season. Well, Joe is still producing 25 goals, 33 assists for 58 points in 81 games. He managed to stay healthy in the only season of his career that would be split between 2 teams. The Stars felt it was time to build in a different way, while the Devils felt they needed someone of Joe's caliber, but despite going 11-3-0 after his arrival, they were bounced in the first round. But Joe finally achieved international championship by winning an Olympic gold medal for Team Canada at the 2002 Olympics in Salt Lake City, and his late tying goal against the Czechs could very well have saved Canada's asses going forward. The Devils decided to keep Joe for the 2002-03 season, as new head coach Pat Burns felt he very much completed a championship caliber team. Also, the team added veteran forward Jeff Friesen and defenseman Oleg Tverdovsky. And Joe was also within striking distance of 2 major milestones. He was 6 goals away from achieving his 500th goal of his career, and 33 points away from achieving his 1,000th point. So now we follow Joe's journey into a full season in New Jersey as he looks to achieve these new milestones. Also, the Devils are not a scoring team, which means Joe's role could very much change. The first few months of the season were indeed underwhelming for our hero. In October, he had 3 points in 8 games and was a -1. In November, he had 7 points in 13 games and was a -2. And then in December, he had 5 points in 14 games and was a -2 again. Despite that, his leadership qualities and work ethic on special teams were still a help, and also that the Devils were having an excellent season. It looked like it was onward and upward going forward for Joe despite his woes, and indeed that momentum went into January. And then we start to see vintage Joe again, as the Devils are down 2-1 to Saku Koivu in the Habs at home in the 3rd period, when Joe and Jamie Show was about to take over, as Langenbrunner's play led to Christian Berglund, and Joe then is set up and scores a huge goal to tie the game, 6:36 into the 3rd, and then 3:13 later, Jeff to Jamie to Joe Nieuwendyk. It proved to be the game winner, and Joe was named the first star of the game. He followed that up 6 days later with 2 assists and a win over the Panthers, but a big day came on January 17, 2003. In a road game against the Carolina Hurricanes, 6:17 into the first period. Joe Nieuwendyk made a great solo effort in on Hurricanes goalie Kevin Weeks and scored career goal number 500, becoming just the 32nd player in the entire history of the NHL to reach that mark. Nearly 16 years prior to this, on March 10th, 1987, on Pete Peters of the Washington Capitals, this journey began. A great moment for Joe Nieuwendyk, as even Hurricanes fans gave him a standing ovation. And after that milestone, his good fortune continued, as in a game on the road against the Sharks, so Joe really turned it up, as the game opened with he and Langenbrunner setting up for a Jeff Friesen goal just 4:36 in. The Sharks tied up, but late in the period, it's Jeff to Joe to Scotty Niedermayer, and the Devils retake their lead. They lead 3-2 in the first, and then stayed the way after the second. But then the Sharks took a 4-3 lead, and the third period was winding down, and with Brodeur on the bench, an extra attacker on the ice, it was Scotty Niedermayer to Jamie Langenbrunner to Joe Nieuwendyk, who tied the game with 13 seconds to play. And as OT is winding down with 28 seconds left, Rafalski sends it into Joe for the OT winner, another game winner, and a 4-point night, and once again named first star of the game. Joe finished January with 5 goals, 5 assists for 10 points in 15 games, and was a monster +9, and the Devils were just rolling, losing 2 games all month. Joe was again productive with another 5 goals and 5 assists for 10 points, this time in 13 games. It was a +5 in February. That included an excellent 2-goal game against the Sabres, but another big day arrived on February 23rd, 2003 against Mario Lemieux and a struggling Penguins squad. The Pens led 3-2 in the third period, but Jeff Friesen sent in Joe Nieuwendyk for his 13th goal of the year and 1,000th career NHL points scored on Sebastian Caron. Another huge milestone for our hero, and doing it is a 1,094th game. Get 65th to reach the 1,000-point milestone. Joe was well on his way to making yet another good case for a future Hall of Fame induction. On top of that, the Devils were looking pretty sharp. Joe finished the year with 4 goals and 6 assists for 10 points in 17 games in March and a few into early April. And also was a +1, including a goal and assist against the Islanders. His goal, you guessed it, was a game winner. The Devils finished 46, 20, 10, and 6 with 108 points, second best record in the East, and winning the Atlantic Division, giving Joe his 11th regular season division title. And once again for our hero, it's playoff time. Awaiting Joe and his boys was a talented Boston Bruins squad, who had a pretty disappointing year, however, finishing with 87 points after they had won their division the year prior. But they had some amazing talent. They had Jumbo Joe Thornton leading the way, coming off his first 100-point season, plus Glenn Murray had an excellent year up front, as did Mike Newell and Brian Rolston. Also, you had key role players such as Josef Stumple, PJ Axelson, Michael Groshek, Marty McInnes, and some playoff experience in Martin Lapointe. Their defense was led by former first-round pick Brian Berard and Hal Gill joining him. Also, Nick Boynton, Jonathan Gerard, Sean O'Donnell, and Don Sweeney complete the blue line, while in goal, Steve Shields and veteran Jeff Hackett, acquired from Montreal, and coached by Mike O'Connell, who replaced Robbie Ftorek. Man, that guy has no luck late in the season. Game 1 in New Jersey, both goaltenders, Shields and Brodeur, are superb, but the Devils lead 1-0 after a goal from Langenbrunner in the latter part of the first period. But midway through the second period, it's Joe and Jamie's show as Nieuwendyk sets up Langenbrunner for a goal. It's 2-0 Devils. The Bruins get one back in the third period, however, but Brodeur and the defense hold them in, and New Jersey takes the first game. Game 2, the Bruins led 1-0 early, but it's the Triple J line. Joe, Jamie to J-E-double-F. Ha-ha! The Devils tie it. Rafalski gives the Devils a lead 2-1 after 1, but it's 2-2 after 2, and then Langenbrunner scores to make it 3-2 in the third, but time is winding down, and the Bruins are trying to press. Cue the Triple J's once again. This time, Jeff, Jamie, and Joe, as he gets his first goal of these playoffs, and scoring the insurance marker in a 4-2 win, notching a goal and a helper. What a game for our hero, and the Devils take a 2-0 series lead. Game 3, we head to Beantown, and the Bruins just can't solve mighty Marty in net. He gets a shutout and a 3-point night from Madden, gives the Devils a 3-0 win and a 3-0 series lead on the verge of a sweep. Joe was pretty quiet, but either way, on the verge of advancing to the second round. Game 4, however, the Bruins show they are not quitters as the Devils got a little too relaxed and were humiliated 5-1. Joe was an abysmal -2 in the loss. And now we are back in New Jersey for Game 5, and the Devils are refocused again. Marty is mighty again in net. 2 goals from Langenbrunner, a 3-0 win. The Devils take this one in 5. A really good series for our hero, especially in the first 2 games. Of course, highlighted by his 2 points in Game 2. His hard work ethic is ever present in these playoffs thus far as the Devils again progress. Awaiting the Devils in the second round was the Tampa Bay Lightning, a team that had been living in the basement so long they should have started paying rent. But head coach John Tortorella has this team more focused than it has ever been in their history, as they reached 93 points, their best regular season ever, and won their division for the first time. They had a strong lineup of young forwards: Vinny LeCavalier, Vinny Prospel, Martin St. Louis, Brad Richards, Ruslan Fedotenko. They also had experience with Freddie Modine and were guided by the leadership of 21-year veteran Dave Andrechuk. On defense, you had the likes of the talented Dan Boyle, Pavel Kubina, Corey Sarek, and former teammate of Joe's from Dallas, Brad Lukowicz. And in net, you had all-star netminder the Bulin Wall, Nikolai Khabibulin. Tampa beat out the Capitals, easy for me to say, in 6 games to get to this point. Their first playoff series win in their history. Game 1 in New Jersey, the Devils' defense is not giving Tampa any room for momentum, as our hero also plays a tight checking game on young Vinny LeCavalier. However, Bulin is stopping shot after shot after shot, and is living up to his nickname so much that it's scoreless after 2 periods. The third, however, the Devils finally get going and score 3 goals and shock the Bulin Wall, and again, they take the win. Game 2, the Lightning lead 2-1 after 2, but our boys isn't playing overly well. But the Devils tie it midway through the third, and Langenbrunner, who's been great in these playoffs, scores the OT winner, taking a page out of his mentor's book, and the Devils lead the series 2-0. Game 3, we're in the Sunshine State, and it's not good. The Lightning lead 3-0 after 1. However, in the second, cue the comeback. Madden and Marshall score under a minute apart, and then later on it's Joe starting things to Giunta to Friesen. The game is tied. But early in the third period, Dave Andrechuk, easy to get his first cup ring, keeps the Bolts in the series with the game winner. The Bulin Wall holds the fort in a 4-3 Tampa win. They're still in this one. Game 4 looks pretty good as the Devils take a 2-1 lead in the first and hang on to that lead going into the third period thanks to Marty playing another beauty in goal. Then later in the third period, power play. Joe is in command and feeds it to Captain Scott Stevens for the goal. The Devils lead 3-1 and they take a 3-1 series lead as they head home. Game 5, both teams exchange a goal in the first period, and that's how it would stay through regulation. We're off to OT, and we all know Joe knows all about that kind of pressure. It's something he's thrived on. But 1 OT became 2, 2 became 3, and midway through the extra frame, Grant Marshall sends the Devils on forward, taking the series in 5 games. And yes, indeed, the Devils reached the conference final for the 3rd time in 4 seasons. Not a great series for Joe, as the Bolts seem to have his number in many games, but he did add pressure to Vincent LeCavalier in also many of those games, as he was a pretty lowly -4, but either way, his team moves on, and he's one series away, 1 series win that is, from having yet another shot at the Stanley Cup. Boy, here we go, the Eastern Conference Final. The one most experts thought we'd see, and that's the Devils taking on the one team that was better than them in the East, the Ottawa Senators. The Sens have been contenders for a few years, but they either ran into someone simply better or they outright choked, or both. But what a team this was. They were led by team captain, fearless leader Daniel Alfredson. He had one of the most talented wingers in the game in Marian Hossa, also Todd White, Martin Hallett, and one of the coolest names ever in hockey, Radek Bonk. They were all keys to making this team into what they were. While also Marcus Arvidsson, Sean Van Allen, Brian Smolinski, Peter Schaefer added depth to the club. On defense, what a core they had. The phenomenal force that was Big Zdeno Chara, and the talented Wade Redden and the ever-popular Chris Phillips, as well as Karl Rakhniuk and Anton Volchenkov rounding out the core. In goal, the mighty talented Patrick Lalime. They swiftly took out the Islanders in 5 games and then had a hard-fought series with the Flyers, taking them out in 6 games. But coached by Jacques Martin, many felt the Sens' time was now here at last. So here we go. Game 1 in Ottawa, and it looks bleak early as the Sens take a 2-0 lead to end the first. In the second, however, it's Niedermeyer, it's Friesen, it's Nieuwendyk. The Devils are in the game. Just over 2.5 minutes later, Jay Pandolfo scores to tie it. It made 2-2 after 2 and was that way through the third as Brodeur and Lalime were amazing. And when we're off to OT just 3 minutes in, Van Allen gives the Senators the win in the first game. Game 2, the Devils are determined to make this one count, and they go up 1-0 in the first, and then it's Double J. Joe to Jeff. Friesen, that is, scores, and it's 2-0 Devils. They led 3-1 after 2 en route to a 4-1 victory, and tying the series as Brodeur again plays marvelously in net. We shift to the Garden State for Game 3, and midway through the first, Sergei Brylin scores, and that's all the Devils need as their defense is superb, and so is Brodeur. Game 4, the Devils look to take control of this series, and it looks like that's how it's going to be. But it's 2-2 early in the third, and 41 seconds into the third. Power play, Joe, check, Rafalski, check, Friesen, check, it's a goal. And that would prove to be the game winner in a 5-2 Devils victory. Our hero and his boys are just one win away from reaching the big dance. Game 5 back in Ottawa, however, the Sens are much more focused and much more disciplined, and it pays off with a 3-1 win as they stay in the series. Josie's minimal ice time is not a factor whatsoever in this game. Game 6 back in New Jersey, and the Garden State faithful are confident, but the Sens lead 1-0 going into the third. Well, let's see. Power play. Okay. Niedermeyer. Yeah. Jeff. And Joe. Yep. The game is tied, but in an exciting overtime, Chris Phillips shocks the Devils fans and forces a 7th game. So the Devils lose their first playoff home game this postseason. Oh boy. Looks like the ghosts from Calgary are coming back to haunt our hero once again. So we're back in Ottawa for the 7th and deciding game, and the Sens Nation is in full force and more excited than ever, but Joe's hip and lower back are in terrible shape after taking some licks in the series, especially in Game 6. After only a couple shifts, his evening is done. And is on the ice for the first Sens goal of that game, which sends the place into a frenzy. Langenbrunner gets 2 in the second, but the Sens tie it early in the third. But with 2:14 to go, Jeff Friesen silences the crowd. What a playoff he is having. And the Sens press and press and press to save their season, but the clock is winding down. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. The New Jersey Devils, for the third time in 4 seasons, are headed to the Stanley Cup Final. Joe played much better in this series and looked excellent in many games, and indeed pushed himself to help this team any way he could in any role. But once again, his body took a beating and it could only hold up for so long, putting his status for what would be his 4th Cup Final appearance in jeopardy. Well, Joe now has a chance to see his name grace Lord Stanley's Cup for a 3rd time in his career. But whether or not he'll be actually on the ice to make it happen is another story, as his prognosis for the Stanley Cup Finals isn't good. But either way, his team must push forward, and Joe is no doubt supporting his club. So here we are, the Stanley Cup Finals, and while the Eastern Conference Finals saw 2 teams that were very much expected to be there, the West was quite the opposite. The Mighty Ducks of Anaheim entered the playoffs as the 7th-seeded team, but they were still a talent-heavy club, with superstar forward Paul Kariya leading the way, along with former Devils star Peter Sikora, Steve Ruchin, all-star center and one of the best setup men to ever play the game, Adam Oates, along with role players such as Stanislav Christoph, Jason Krog, Sam Paulson, savvy clutch scoring veteran Steve Thomas, and grinding forward Rob Niedermeyer, yes indeed, Scott's brother. On defense, they had acquired all-star Sandy Sozolinch to join Nicholas Havilland, Keith Carney, and Ruslan Saleh. But the main reason they got to this point was the sensational goaltending of Jean-Sébastien Giguère, making many headlines in the hockey and sports media. Coached by the controversial Mike Babcock, this Ducks club shocked the hockey world by sweeping out the defending champion Red Wings, as well as Joe's former team, the Dallas Stars, who actually rebounded to finish top in the West, but the Ducks downed them in 6 games. And then they put together with another Cinderella story, the third-year Minnesota Wild. They were polished off in a sweep. But here we go, once again. Game 1, the Devils' defense is again on point, and Jeff Friesen has 2 goals and a 3-0 win. Brodeur gets yet another playoff shutout. It's the same story in Game 2, as Ilyash, Tverdovsky, and Gomez each have 2 points in a 3-0 win. As the Ducks have been subdued completely, the Devils take a 2-0 series lead. Game 3, this series shifts to the Duck Pond. The Ducks are much more focused and determined to put pressure on Brodeur, but it's scoreless after 1, meaning the Devils have held the Ducks to 7 scoreless periods. However, that changed in the second period as the Ducks led 2-1, but a goal from Gomez midway through the third tied things. We're off to OT, but Saleh scores, and the Ducks are in this thing. Game 4, Brodeur and Giguère putting on a show, while both teams' defensive play is solid and it's scoreless after regulation. But just 39 seconds in overtime, Steve Thomas wins it for the Ducks, and the series is tied just like that. Back to New Jersey for Game 5, the Devils lead 4-3 in the third period, and Joe's line mate Jamie Langenbrunner scores 2 goals to give the Devils a 6-3 win in what was also a huge night for Brian Gionta. And the Devils are just 1 game away from taking it all. Game 6, however, rather infamous moment as the Ducks led 3-1 and Scott Stevens rocked Paul Kariya with an earth-shattering hit, looking like he took him out of the game and maybe even the series. While Kariya returned that period, scored a goal as he'd been struggling in this series en route to a 5-2 Ducks victory and forcing Game 7. Joe had resumed skating with the team and wanted to be there for this huge game and was determined to make it there to help his team win the big prize, but alas, he just felt he was unable to play and lend any significant contribution to his club and opted to sit out. Game 7 would go on with Joe supporting his team in the arena. A 2-goal game from Jeff Friesen and another shutout from Marty means that the New Jersey Devils are Stanley Cup champions. Joe Nieuwendyk gets his name in the cup for a third time, gets himself a third piece of jewelry as he was on the ice to celebrate with his teammates and enjoy the glory of being a champion yet again. Some have said when it comes to playoffs, you play hurt and power through the pain. Yet on the other side of the coin, a player has to think about his team and believes he may be a liability to his teammates. Either side of the argument is valid, as the athlete themselves are the only ones who truly know if they can go or not. Joe felt his team was better off without him and didn't want to hinder them, and made the selfless decision to sit out Game 7, having faith in his boys that they could bring it home, and they did just that. In Joe's full season with the Devils, he scored 17 goals, 20 assists for 45 points in 80 games. Definitely not his best statistical season, but still fit into the role that New Jersey put him with. And it was the Triple J line, along with Langenbrunner and Friesen, that made things click. Langenbrunner set up 7 of Joe's goals, as the two were together to create 16 goals, keeping up the chemistry they had in Dallas. However, over a third of Joe's assists went to Jeff Friesen as he set up 10 of his 23 goals. The two were together for 10 assists as well. This, however, was only the third time Joe failed to reach 20 goals, the other two being his disastrous first season in Dallas, and of course his injury-plagued 99-2000 season. But regardless, he contributed a huge deal to his team in many ways. He finished a +10, accomplished his 500th goal, 1,000th career point, and of course his third Stanley Cup ring. So I'd say the year was a success. Also, it seems no matter where he goes, he has the respect of his teammates, as he is voted the player's player of the organization by his brothers in arms. Joe's time in New Jersey, however, was short-lived as he decided to test the free agency market, but in his part of 2 seasons with the Devils, including 1 full season, he obtained a Stanley Cup glory for a third time in 2003, 500 goal, 1,000 point, and of course the respect of his comrades with his Players Player Award. In just 92 games, Joe was a +12 with New Jersey, and now with another Cup ring, we'll see where Joe can take his services. He feels he has a lot more to offer. For the 2003-04 season, Joe Nieuwendyk would then sign a 1-year deal with the Toronto Maple Leafs, the very team he grew up watching, living out the dream of all kids in Ontario, and blah 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 blah. Anyway, the Leafs have been a contender again since, well, Pat Quinn regime took over, as in the previous 5 seasons they had totals of 97, 100, 90, 100, and 98 points respectively, and making the playoffs every year, even making it to the conference finals twice. But around this time, the Leafs organization had pretty much become a glorified retirement home haven for hockey players on the downswing of their career. Though they had their motives for obtaining Joe as well, they had a pretty good power play they were looking to improve in, and of course Nieuwendyk is the type of player to do that, of course. The team was still led by coach and general manager Pat Quinn, and Joe Nieuwendyk was joining a strong, talented bunch such as Matt Sundin, superstar forward and team captain, who is reaching legend status himself. Also all-stars such as Alexander McGillney, Owen Nolan, and 2 men that Joe was very familiar with, Robert Reichel, former teammate in Calgary, and, speaking of former teammates from Calgary, his longtime best friend, Gary Roberts. In addition, up front, the Leafs also had Darcy Tucker, Nick Antropov, Matt Stajan, Ty Domi, and Michael Renberg. On defense, they were led by resident scapegoat Brian McCabe, as well as Thomas Caberlet, Ken Klee, and Aki Berg. In net, someone else Joe was very familiar with, a former Stars teammate, Ed Belfour. He had joined the team the year before, as well as backup Trevor Kidd, who was Joe's teammate for 2 seasons in Calgary. But can our pal make a difference in Toronto? Let's find out. In Joe's first 4 games, he was pointless in a -2, but then went on a 6-game point streak to end the month. He had 3 goals and 3 assists for 6 points on that streak, which became his month's total, including a game-winning goal against his former team, Dallas. The Leafs were off to a decent yet not great start, and in November the Leafs started winning a little more often, but Joe missed 11 games at 2 assists in the 4 he played, as his abdominal and back issues were wearing him down. But in December, Joe was excellent. 6 goals, 8 assists for 14 points in 12 games and a tremendous +5. That included a goal and 2 assists over Lindros Messier and the Rangers, and 3 points in an exciting 5-4 win. He'd follow that up the very next game with 2 goals against the Boston Bruins, both on the power play. Later in the month, he'd have back-to-back 2-point outings, both wins over the Panthers and the Rangers, as the Leafs would only suffer 1 regulation loss the entire month. In January, the Leafs would see some struggles, but overall were still staying high above the ground. And Joe would muster up 8 points in 15 games and had 3 2-point performances, including a goal and an assist against the pathetic Penguins squad in a dominant win. Just over a week later, 2 assists against Calgary, and at the end of the month, 2 assists against Danny Heatley, Ilya Kovalchuk, and the Thrashers. Joe's February, however, wasn't all that stellar, as neither was it for the Leafs. He still had a respectable 6 points in 8 games, but missed 5 due to injury. The Leafs were very inconsistent, a big shock. In March into early April, however, our hero was back to himself, with 14 points in 15 games and a big +7, with a big game winner and 3 power play goals. That's right, including a 2-goal performance in an emphatic 6-0 win over their heated rivals, the Ottawa Senators. The Leafs had welcomed more into their retirement home, including Brian Leach and Ron Francis that month as well. The Leafs finished 45, 24, 10, and 3 for 103 points, just a point back of division rivals Boston. But they made the playoffs for the 6th straight season, and for Joe will be his 16th postseason appearance, and indeed he did what he came there to do, and that's improved the Leafs power play, which jumped from 11th to 4th this year. But here we go once again. It's playoff time. Oh, yes, here we go. The Battle of Ontario. Well, nowhere near as exciting as the Battle of Alberta, or for that matter, the Battle of Quebec, but hey, we'll take it. The Senators team finished with 102 points, just 1 behind the Leafs. This is very much the same Sens team that Joe faced last season in the conference finals, as a member of the New Jersey Devils. But something key to point out this season, as Jason Spezza's star was rising, and they had acquired goal-scoring veteran Peter Bondra to boost their chances. These two have faced each other 3 other times in the playoffs, the Leafs winning every battle. So, Game 1. The ACC and Leafs Nation are ready as just 3:15 in. It's Nick to Alexei to Drew. It's 1-0 Leafs, and they lead 2-1 after 1, but the Sens defense and the Leafs' lack of pressure on them cost them. Oh boy, they lose 4-2 and drop the first game. Game 2, it's 2 longtime teammates of Joe's. First is Calgary boy and bestie Gary Roberts has 2 goals, while his Dallas Stars alum Eddie the Eagle subs 31 shots in a shutout that Leafs tie the series as we shift to the nation's capital. Game 3 in Ottawa, it's scoreless after 1 period, but then 1:30 into the second, it's Ronnie Franchise to Joey Nieuwendyk. The Leafs lead 1-0 and go on to win 2-0, and they had another sensational performance from Belfour and another game winner for our boy. The Leafs take the series lead 2-1. Game 4, our hero sits out, and it was costly as the Leafs are decimated 4-1. The series is tied at 2 as we shift to Toronto once again. Game 5, Joe suits up, and it helps, as the Leafs' defensive play is on point, containing the Sens' top guys, and leading 1-0 late in the third, with 4:27 left. It's Alexei to Gaberle. It's a goal, 2-0 win for the Leafs, on the verge of sending the Sens home once again. Game 6, it's tied 1-1 after regulation. We're off to OT. The Leafs have trouble putting pressure on Laline. Belfour has faced a lot. We go to double OT, and just 1:47 into the double OT, Mike Fisher sends us to Game 7. So here we go, the 7th and deciding game. Can our hero do something special here with his experience? Well, the Leafs lead 1-0 after a Chad Kilger goal early in the first, and 1:22 later, it's Alexei to Leach to Nui. He scores his 4th goal of the series. Oh, but wait, this first period is winding down. Nick to McCabe to Nieuwendyk, his 2nd goal of the game. The Leafs lead 3-0 after 1. The Sens put Belfour, however, under pressure, but he only let 1 by him, and he was awesome in net yet again. The Leafs walk away with a 4-1 victory and a series win. Oh, Joe was excellent in the series, 5 goals and a +4, including 2 game winners and his amazing Game 7 performance, as again, his reputation in series-clinching games is enhanced even further. And hey, it's still evident after all these years. Awaiting the Leafs in the next round was the Philadelphia Flyers, who finished with 101 points, just 2 behind the Leafs, but were the higher-seeded team due to winning their division. They're one of the deepest teams in the NHL, led by many seasoned vets. 15-year veteran, the ageless all-star Mark Recchi. Veteran all-star John LeClaire was also still very productive, as were Jeremy Roenick and Tony Amonte. To add to that, you had Michael Handzus, who had a tremendous year. Young Simon Gagne was one of the best all-around forwards in the game. Plus, you had a good chunk of character players in Sammy Kapanen, Keith Primo, and young Patrick Sharp. This defense was full of strength and grit, with Joni Pitkanen, Marcus Ragnarsson, Kim Johnson, and Vladimir Malakhov. And in net, they had Robert Esch, who had a fantastic year, and backing him up was veteran Sean Burke. And behind the bench, someone Joe was very familiar with, the Flyers coach Ken Hitchcock. So here we go. Game 1 does not go well in Philly, and the Leafs drop a 3-1 loss, and our heroes a -2 with 2 shots on goal. Game 2, Joe's injuries problems surface, and he sits this one out, and at least lose another one, this time 2-1, and as Esch is too much to handle, they're down 2-0 heading home. Game 3, Joe is still out of action, but the Leafs are still in it. A huge team effort and a better game defensively overall give them a 4-1 win. Game 4, the Leafs take it again, this time 3-1 on the strength of 2 goals by Matt Sundin and 2 assists from Gary Roberts, and Belfour playing another beauty and goal. Game 5, we shift back to the city of brotherly love, and our boy is back in action, and it looks really bad early as the Flyers lead 3-0 as the first period is winding down. But on the power play, it's Francis to Cabaret to Drew. His 6th goal of these playoffs, but it means very little. The Leafs get destroyed 7-2. They're on the verge of elimination as we head to Game 6 in Toronto, and again, it does not look good. The Leafs trail 2-0 after 2 periods. Our hero can't get anything going. He is turned away 6 times in this game by Esch. But the Leafs have life as Pilar gets a goal in the third, in which is under 5 minutes left. Sundin ties it, sending the ACC into a frenzy. We're up to OT and 7:39 in. Jeremy Roenick ends, of all people, I might add, ends the Leafs season. Not a good series for Joe, as he did miss half of it, only played 3 games. It was a pretty bad -4, and only mustered up to 1 goal in a dominant loss. Far cry from his performance against the Sens. The Flyers would be eliminated, however, in the conference final by eventual Cup champions, the Tampa Bay Lightning. And here's an interesting note. The Lightning, to win it, beat the Calgary Flames, who made the playoffs for the first time since the 1995-96 season when Joe left the team, led by the man they traded him for, Jerome McGinley, and they went on a Cinderella run before losing a heartbreaker to the Bolts in 7 games. Joe Nieuwendyk had 22 goals and 28 assists for 50 points in 64 games, playing a much more prominent role with the Leafs than he did with the Devils a year prior. Once again, he worked well with leading ahead of the great setup defensemen such as Brian McCabe, who assisted on 7 of Joe's goals, nearly a third. Joe was clicking again with his friend Gary Roberts, showing some magic from the Calgary days, setting him up for 5 goals. But the season saw him mostly put together with Antropov and Ponikarovsky, as he worked well with them to produce 27 goals one way or another, including collaborating on 5 assists with Antropov. He also showed some chemistry when he was put on the ice with Sundin periodically. Hey, at least Joe was recognized a little bit by award voters this year for the first time in a long time, coming in tied for 28th place with the Lady Byng Trophy for excellence in sportsmanship, obtaining 8 votes for the award. It's the first time since 1998 he'd received any votes for it, and the 5th time in his career. And despite being an excellent two-way forward most of his career, it was only now Joe got any recognition for the Selke Trophy, getting 3 votes and tied for 49th place. But hey, another good year for Joe Nieuwendyk, as he did help the Leafs improve their power play and help them make the playoffs once again. He finished a +7 and reached the 20-goal mark for the 15th time, and he got to live out his dream of wearing a Maple Leafs sweater. And now after 17 full NHL seasons, Joe is approaching 38 years old, and despite more injury issues, he's still seen as an asset to any given team. So much so that the Leafs agreed to sign Joe for the 2004-05 season. But there's just one problem. There was no 2004-05 season, as a lockout put an end to any hope of pro hockey for that year. Thank you very much, Mr. Bettman, setting the league back, which should have been years, but thankfully it didn't have to come to that. With the lockout settled, however, Joe still wanted to play hockey, but it wasn't going to be with the Leafs. They weren't going to sign him to another deal, so he had to find another home. Meaning his brief stay in Toronto is over, but I have no doubt on his bucket list that he wanted to fulfill, and he got to do it. And once again, be able to contribute wherever he plays. And now at that, what becomes of Joe as he reaches 39 years old as the 2005-06 season approaches? Well, there are teams who still see his value, so he shall continue to power through and give as much as he has left. So indeed, Joe, along with Gary Roberts, both signed 2-year deals to play with the Florida Panthers beating into the 2005-06 season. The Panthers are a fledgling franchise that could no doubt garner wisdom from the 2 experienced veterans. They are trying to build into something more as they haven't made the playoffs since the 1999-2000 season. In their previous 11 seasons in their franchise history, they've only made the postseason 3 times. Panthers general manager maniac Mike Keenan and his weird obsession with veteran players was definitely on display, but the man has had success in the very distant past, so we'll see what he can do now. In addition to Joe and Gary, he added Martin Jelena, who in the prior season was a huge part of Calgary's run to the Stanley Cup Finals, earning the nickname the Terminator. Josef Stumpel adds size and depth to the club, as does Chris Gratton. The Panthers, however, did have a star forward in Olli Jokinen, and 2003 third overall pick Nathan Horton. On defense, they were led by young sensation Jay Bouwmeester, and who had been part of Canada's World Cup of Hockey club and winning club in 2004. He's aided by Mike Van Ryn, Sean Hill, Joel Kwiatkowski, and Luka Krejcik. But in goal, their ace was all-star Roberto Luongo. Could Joe's death bring some substance to this club? Also improve their so-so power play? Well, let's find out. Joe had 3 points and a +1 to start the season in October, and the Panthers looked somewhat decent, but then Joe would miss 15 games due to injury issues, and the Panthers had a dreadful run in that time, and when Joe returned on November 23rd, the Panthers were on the abysmal 11-game winless streak going into a game against the Devils, and while he notched an assist, the winless streak turned into 12 games. They however snapped the streak in the next game against the Pittsburgh Penguins, where Joe graced the face-off circle against Mario Lemieux for the very last time, and also took a draw with 18-year-old youngster by the name of Sidney Crosby for the very first time. In December, Joe found a groove and the Panthers improved slightly. He had a 2-goal game against Saku Koivu and the Montreal Canadiens and totaled 6 goals, 4 assists, and 10 points. January was an excellent month for Joe. 2 assists against a rookie by the name of Alex Ovechkin in the Washington Capitals. He also had a goal and a helper in a loss to Rick Nash and the Blue Jackets. He also had a goal and an assist against his former team, the Leafs, but the Panthers couldn't amass enough momentum to generate a group of wins. Joe's new year in January, however, totaled 6 goals, 7 assists, and 13 points, and a really good +5 in 13 games. There were only 5 games in February due to the Olympic break, and Joe had 6 points in those 5 games, half of which came in a win over the defending champions Tampa Bay Lightning, 2 goals and a helper for 3 points. And while March saw the Panthers have their best month yet, Joe actually played kind of miserably, as he had in Marches of the years past. He had 7 points in 15 games, not even averaging half a point a game, and a terrible -9. He did have a goal and an assist against the Capitals on March 22nd, and the Panthers were still within a long reach, mind you, of a playoff spot, but they pretty much have to be unstoppable to obtain it. Well, Joe more than did his part. 7 goals, 8 assists for 15 points in just 9 games. He was no April Fool when he scored another 2 goals and 3 points against Tampa yet again. But then the Panthers went on a 3-game losing streak, one against the Atlanta Thrashers, a team that they were trying to catch no less, while Joe had 2 assists on that loss. That pretty much meant Florida's chances of a playoff spot were dashed. However, Joe continued to shine with 10 points in the final 5 games of the season. But his big night came at Toronto on April 11th. Joe scored a goal to make it 2-0 for the Panthers in the first. After Toronto had tied the game in the second, it's Olli to Gary to Joe on the power play, of course. And the Panthers lead 3-2 and tied 3-3 early in the third period. Jelena to Hill to Joe Nieuwendyk, his 14th and final career hat-trick, his first in over 5 years. He also assisted on a Jay Bouwmeester goal with 3:23 to play to tie the game, giving him a 4-point night, sending the game into overtime, but the Panthers would lose. Joe was named second star of the game behind former teammate Matt Sundin at a 6-point night, but Joe was given an ovation by the Leafs fans in the ACC that night, showing even though he only played 1 season there, he made an impact. The Panthers finished 37-34-11 for 85 points, but it was not good enough for the playoffs, meaning for just the 3rd time in his entire career, and for the first time since his first season in Dallas back in 95-96, Joe Nieuwendyk would not be seeing any postseason action. Joe had 26 goals and 30 assists for 56 points in 65 games. That's an improvement from even last season. His highest point total since his trade to New Jersey, as a matter of fact, and a really good season for our hero, Nathan Horton, who, much like Jamie Langenberger before him, was taken under Joe's wing and thrived setting up our hero for 7 goals, over a quarter of Joe's goals, and also being set up for 6 goals himself, where a fifth of Joe's assists went that year. In total, they collaborated with 16 goals one way or another. His top assist collaborator was Mike Van Ryn with 5, and when shifted with his old friend Gary Roberts, they still had some magic, while he also worked tremendously with Jokinen, Stumpel, and fellow veteran Martin Jelena. and Jay Bouwmeester was once again a tremendous help this year, as another defenseman along with Ian Van Ryn proved to be a formula in Joe's career where two big defensemen seem to help him out a lot in a given season. At almost 40 years old, Joe still has something left, and it showed. Despite missing the playoffs for the third time in his career, he did help the Panthers to their first winning record since 1999-2000. He showed tremendous leadership to the younger players under his wing, and desperately tried his damnedest to make the Florida Panthers a winner. And despite having to overcome more injuries, he thrived most of the way, still forcing the power play, still coming up in the clutch, and as always, just giving everything he had. This Florida Panthers team did have some potential and a lot of talent, but just couldn't get over a certain hump. But Joe Nieuwendyk wanted to see this through and help this team get better as he enters his 19th full NHL season. However, Joe's plethora of injuries, while they put him down but never out over the years, were really truly starting to catch up with him. His back was now becoming an issue, but he really wanted to gut it out and take this Florida team to another level for the 06-07 season. A lot of his peers actually retired by the end of 2006. Mario Lemieux, Brett Hull, Steve Yzerman, Dave Anderchuk, and Luc Robitaille all called it quits. But does he have that extra something to give? Let's find out. Joe started the season right. 2 goals and an assist for 3 points in an 8-3 thrashing of Zdeno Chara and the Boston Bruins. And that was the Joe many had seen for many years, dating back to his illustrious rookie season in Calgary. But the next 2 games, sadly, were a different story. He didn't play well in a loss to Atlanta. Then during a game against the Leafs, his back was acting up again and he left the game. It would miss the next 5. He returned and scored a goal against the Thrashers, but the Panthers still lost, and they lose the next one. And then Joe was hurt again in a game against the Rangers and missed the next 4. He returned on November 8th against the Rangers and got an assist in a shootout loss and a goal against Buffalo, missed 2 more games and returned again. Another big moment for Joe took place on November 20th, 2006. In a game against the Boston Bruins. The Panthers leading 2-1 in the third on a power play. Ruslan Saleh gets it to Juraj Kolnick, who gives it to Joe one last time. His 215th career power play goal. The eventual game winner, the 93rd of his career in that regard. In a 3-2 victory, the goal scored in a manner where Joe has thrived the best. It was also the 564th and final goal of his career. The next game against Tampa, he along with Jokinen on the power play set up Salai with a goal, the 1126th point of our hero's career, and his last. On November 28, 2006, the Florida Panthers visited a sharp-looking Montreal Canadiens team in what would be the 1257th game of Joe Nieuwendyk's career. It was a hard-fought defensive battle with goaltenders Alex Auld of the Panthers and Cristobal Ue of the Habs, both performing superbly. Joe played the whole game and registered a shot on goal. The game went to a shootout, but the Panthers would lose. Nobody knew it at the time, but Joe Nieuwendyk had played his very last game. He went back on injured reserve, and then, on December 7, 2006, Joe Nieuwendyk made the announcement official. He literally went as hard as he could until he couldn't go anymore. His chronic back pain was just getting too hard to handle. He felt it was time to hang up his skates. Indeed, he retired from the game of hockey at the age of 40, with no regrets whatsoever. And to be fair, the man had nothing to prove. From going to being an unknown whose name received laughs on draft day as Joe Who, to one of the bona fide best in the game. The sports media and fans in Calgary obviously know that time heals all wounds. They paid tribute to their star in very kind fashion, while fans in Dallas also spoke very highly of their hero for leading them to the Stanley Cup. Joe's final season only consisted of 15 games where he managed to notch 5 goals and 3 assists. And Rostislav Olas and former Canucks All-Star Todd Bertuzzi each assisted on Joe's goals twice, while 2 out of the 3 of Joe's assists went to defenseman Ruslan Saleh. While each of his assists were with 3 different players, Bertuzzi, Jokinen, and Horton. I should note that his very first career NHL game and his very last career NHL game were played alongside his best friend and line mate, Gary Roberts. It's not the ending Joe wanted, but he went out with nothing to look back upon and wish he could have done differently. The Panthers had another winning season in his absence, but again fell short of a playoff spot. Gary Roberts would later be traded to the Pittsburgh Penguins and actually play 3 more years in the NHL, retiring at the age of 43. What a journey for Joe Nieuwendyk, all things considered. Joe wanted to do more for this Panthers team, and everyone knows he would if he could have, but either way, in his last full season with the club in 2005-06, he showed despite everything he'd been through in injuries and the longevity of his career, he had a lot to offer and was willing to give it all. Joe took an assistant GM job with the Florida Panthers after his retirement and had that role for a few seasons. He also took the general manager job with his former team, the Dallas Stars, in 2009 and 2010. Unfortunately, Joe was in a no-win situation. As he arrived, former teammates Zador and Zubov left the team at the end of that prior season. Mike Modena was in his waning years, and though he did trade back for former teammate Jamie Langenbrunner, he didn't fare all that well at the draft, and the Stars never made the playoffs during his 4 years there. He spent 4 seasons as a scout in Carolina afterwards. In 2010, he was eligible for the Hall of Fame, but was passed over. But in 2011, he was on the ballot and received what he deserved, enshrinement into the Hockey Hall of Fame, regarded as one of the best stick handlers, power play performers, and clutch scorers of all time, and a great leader. In 2014, those chants of Joe, Joe, Joe once again echoed from the Flames faithful when the Calgary Flames honored him as Forever a Flame, raising his number 25 to the rafters, a banner gracing his image as a proud member of the Flames as he was for 8 seasons. And on top of that, in 2017, the NHL's 100th anniversary, Joe Nieuwendyk was named one of the 100 greatest players of all time. I'd say that's pretty good for a guy who barely anybody expected much out of. When you look at the career of Joe Nieuwendyk, you look at a man who was valuable wherever he played, be it his long legendary tenures in Calgary and Dallas, or his brief stops in New Jersey, Toronto, and Florida. He was a trusted leader respected by his teammates and peers, a warrior who, despite, again, numerous injuries and pitfalls, still had an incredible career, and refused to truly let it defeat him or define his career. He only retired when he felt there was literally nothing more he could give. As of course there were times he played hurt and gutted through the pain, but other times he stepped aside, not wanting to be a liability for any given team he played for. Selfless in every sense of the word. 564 goals, 562 assists, 1,126 career points in 1,257 games, a very impressive career plus 155. He led the league in power play goals and game-winning goals once each, and was in the top 10 for the former 4 other times, and the latter in 3. And currently, as of December 3rd, 2023, 13th all-time in power play goals and 14th all-time in game winners. 3 Stanley Cup rings with 3 different teams. Calgary in 1989, where his play in series-clinching games was outstanding. His incredible performance in 1999 as a clutch performer and winning the Conn Smythe Trophy as playoff MVP with the Stars. In 2003, his leadership role and guidance with the Devils. He also played in the 2000 Stanley Cup Final with the Stars. He had 116 total points in 158 playoff games and only missed the playoffs 3 times. He won the Calder Trophy as the league's top rookie, while becoming just the second rookie and currently still just one of 4 to reach 50 goals in their first season. Also, 4 President's Trophies, 2 each with the Flames and Stars for having the league's best record, and 11 regular season division titles. That's just plain incredible. 5 each with the Flames and Stars and 1 with the Devils. Also some team awards, 2 Molson Cups with the Flames, as the top point getter when it came to end of game 3-star selections, and voted the Devils Players Player by his teammates in 2003, and oh yes, 4 NHL All-Star games, let's not forget. But here's a stat you won't find with any award. He led the Flames, they made the playoffs the year he left, but it took 8 years for them to make it again, and they have not won a cup since that 89 team he was a part of. But they played in the final in 04. The Dallas Stars, he left, they've only made it to the cup final once since, and have not won it since his storied performance in 99. The Devils in 03 even had appeared in 1 cup since Joe's departure, but haven't won one since his departure. The Leafs made the playoffs in 2004, Joe's only a year there, and wouldn't make it again until 2013. The Panthers even wouldn't make the playoffs until 2012, over 5 years after he retired. Now, you can just chalk this up to coincidence, obviously, but it still seems pretty interesting the fate of these teams after he left them. Also, he represented his country of Canada, winning a silver medal at the 1986 Juniors, making a brief appearance at the 1990 World Championships, but sadly was injured for the Canada Cup in 1991 and was barely considered for the 96 World Cup of Hockey, but played in the Olympics in 1998 and in 2002 won a gold medal at the Olympics, where his famous goal against the Czechs prevented Canada from pretty much falling out of the tournament. And what more can you say? Hockey Hall of Fame in 2011, honored player for the Flames, and one of the 100 greatest players of all time. So indeed, that does it for our 4-part look at the great career of Joe Nieuwendyk. Are there any other players you'd like to see us cover? Leave a suggestion in the comments. Until next time, hit like, hit subscribe, and I'll see ya.